The $100 billion Soviet Bluff. $100 billion Soviet Bluff. Every MiG ever built. In the early 1970s, the United States Air Force was in a state of absolute panic. Satellites had spotted a new Soviet shadow, the MiG-25. It was a massive twin-tailed monster that moved across the radar at Mach 3.2. To the Pentagon, this was the superfighter that would end Western air dominance forever. They panicked. They poured billions of dollars into the F-15 Eagle project just to survive the threat of this Russian ghost. But it was all a trap. In 1976, a Soviet pilot named Viktor Belenko flew that ghost into Japan, defecting to the West. When CIA engineers finally tore the plane apart, they didn't find a futuristic wonder weapon. They found vacuum tubes, heavy hand-welded steel, and engines that would literally melt if they stayed at top speed for more than a minute. The most feared jet in history was a billion-dollar bluff. At KineticSkyy, we go beneath and defecting to the West. When CIA engineers finally tore the plane apart, they didn't find a futuristic wonder weapon. They found vacuum tubes, heavy hand-welded steel, and engines that would literally melt if they stayed at top speed for more than a minute. The most feared jet in history was a billion-dollar bluff. At KineticSkyy, we go beneath the fuselage. Today, we aren't just listing planes, we are performing an autopsy on the Mikoyan-Gurevich Empire, a 70-year history of strategic gambles, engineering death traps, and the $100 billion secret that nearly bankrupted the world. This is every MiG ever built. The story of MiG begins with a desperate gamble in 1939. Artem Mikoyan and Mikhail Gurevich were tasked with a mission: build a fighter that could fly higher and faster than anything in Germany. The result was the MiG-1, and shortly after, the MiG-3. On paper, the MiG-3 was a masterpiece. It was faster than a Spitfire at high altitudes. But here was the first strategic trap. The war in the East wasn't fought at 30,000 feet. It was fought in the mud, at low altitudes, where the MiG-3 handled like a moving brick. Soviet pilots didn't just fly these planes, they survived them. Out of the 3,000 built, most were lost not to German bullets, but to their own flight characteristics. Stalin wanted a high-altitude interceptor, but the reality of war demanded a low-level brawler. The mismatch was a billion-dollar waste of resources during the USSR's darkest hour. Then came 1946. The jet age was born from the ashes of stolen German blueprints. The MiG-9 was the Soviet Union's first jet fighter, but it was a literal death trap. The engines were so poorly positioned that when the pilot fired the nose cannon, the engine would suck in the gunpowder smoke and flame out. It was a plane that could kill its own pilot just for defending itself. But then, the gamble paid off. In 1947, the British sold the Soviets the Rolls-Royce Nina engine. The Soviets didn't just use it, they copied it, refined it, and built the MiG-15. This changed everything. In the MiG alley of Korea, the MiG-15 became the West's first true nightmare. It was faster, climbed better, and packed more punch than anything the Americans had. The world realized that the Mikoyan Bureau wasn't just a design house, it was a weapon of mass geopolitical leverage. As the 1950s rolled into the 60s, the stakes got higher. The MiG-17 and MiG-19 paved the way for the legendary MiG-21 Fishbed. The MiG-21 is the most produced supersonic jet in history. Over 11,000 were built. It was the AK-47 of the skies. Simple, cheap, and deadly. This was the pinnacle of the Soviet strategy. Quantity as a quality of its own. They didn't need to build a better plane than the US F-4 Phantom. They just needed to build 10 of them for every one the Americans produced. This was a strategic trap that bled the US Treasury dry, but the ultimate gamble was yet to come. The United States was developing the XB-70 Valkyrie, a nuclear bomber that could fly at Mach 3. To stop it, the Soviets built the MiG-25. To the West, the MiG-25 looked like the future. It had massive wings and massive intakes. The US assumed the Soviets had discovered a new way to work with titanium. The reality? The titanium was actually nickel steel. The Eagle wings were only massive because the plane was so heavy it needed them just to stay in the air. For a decade, the Soviets kept the MiG-25 in service purely as a psychological weapon. They flew it over Israel at Mach 3.2, knowing the engines would be ruined afterward just to make the West believe they were decades ahead. It was the most expensive piece of theater in human history. Every dollar the US spent on the F-15 was a response to a Soviet lie. By the late 1970s, the bluff was starting to crumble. The West had finally caught up. The US introduced the Teen Series fighters, the F-14, F-15, and F-16. For the first time, Soviet engineers weren't just competing with physics, they were competing with computers. The response was the MiG-29 Fulcrum. The MiG-29 was designed to be a beautiful aerodynamic masterpiece. It could perform maneuvers that left Western pilots speechless, like the Cobra. But the MiG-29 fell into a different kind of trap, the short-legged trap. It was designed as a frontline fighter for a war in Europe that never happened.
When the 1970s dawned, American military intelligence experienced genuine terror. Spy satellites revealed something extraordinary. A Soviet aircraft designated MiG-25, tearing through airspace at speeds exceeding 3 times the speed of sound. Pentagon analysts believed they'd discovered an invincible aerial predator. Washington responded by funneling enormous sums into developing the F-15 program. The entire response hinged on combating what turned out to be an illusion. Everything changed in 1976. Viktor Belenko, a Soviet aviator, landed his MiG-25 on Japanese soil seeking asylum. American technicians dissected the aircraft expecting advanced technology. Instead, they discovered outdated tube electronics, crudely welded metal structures, and power plants prone to catastrophic failure during sustained high-speed flight. The supposedly invincible interceptor was nothing more than an elaborate deception. At KineticSkyy, we're diving deep into aviation archaeology. Today's investigation isn't a simple catalog. We're dissecting the Mikoyan-Gurevich legacy, 7 decades of calculated risks, hazardous designs, and the massive financial deception that shook global military balance. Here's the complete chronicle of MiG aircraft. The MiG narrative launches with a critical challenge in 1939. Artem Mikoyan and Mikhail Gurevich received urgent orders: create an interceptor surpassing German aviation capabilities in altitude and velocity. Their answer was the MiG-1, quickly evolving into the MiG-3. Specifications looked impressive. Superior high-altitude performance compared to Britain's Spitfire. However, a fundamental miscalculation emerged. Eastern Front combat occurred at ground level, not in the stratosphere. The MiG-3 proved awkward and unresponsive in actual combat conditions. Soviet aviators considered these machines barely controllable. 3,000 units rolled off production lines, with most casualties resulting from design flaws rather than enemy action. Stalin demanded high-altitude capability, while battlefield reality required low-level agility. This strategic miscalculation squandered precious resources during the Soviet Union's most vulnerable period. 1946 marked transformation. Jet propulsion emerged from captured German research. The MiG-9 became the USSR's inaugural jet fighter, though it contained fatal engineering compromises. Engine placement created a catastrophic vulnerability. Firing the aircraft's primary weapon would flood the engines with combustion gases, causing immediate failure. Pilots risked death simply by engaging enemies. Then fortune smiled. British authorities sold Rolls-Royce Nini engines to Moscow in 1947. Soviet engineers reverse-engineered, improved, and incorporated this technology into the MiG-15. This aircraft revolutionized aerial warfare. Over Korean battlefields in MiG Alley, the MiG-15 established Soviet aviation credibility. It outperformed American counterparts in speed, climb rate, and firepower. The global community recognized the Mikoyan Bureau as a legitimate geopolitical force. The transition from the 1950s into the 1960s escalated competition. The MiG-17 and MiG-19 established foundations for the iconic MiG-21 fishbed. Production exceeded 11,000 units, making it history's most numerous supersonic fighter. Analysts dubbed it the Sky's Kalashnikov, uncomplicated, economical, lethal. This embodied Soviet doctrine, overwhelming numbers compensating for individual capability. Rather than matching American F-4 Phantom quality, they produced tenfold quantities. This approach drained Western military budgets substantially. The supreme gamble arrived with America's XB-70 Valkyrie program. a Mach 3 nuclear strike platform.